Just a little bit of business now, because this week's business tech report shows that Stats SA is tracking business liquidations, and it found that there were more than 140 or around 140 more liquidations in February, taking the total for this year to 246 so far. This is of a 0.4% slight decrease to the same period last year. Why are these businesses facing liquidation? What's happening? Which sectors are they? Which do they cover? And why do they find themselves having to get liquidated? Let's get some insights from the development economist then and Oxfam board member, Phelisa Nkomo. Phelisa, good speaking to you this Sunday morning. Thank you so much for the time. Should we be concerned? 140 is the number for February, 246 so far this year. But we aren't talking about the other side in terms of businesses created in this. So how concerned should we be?
We should really be concerned because it signals that our economy is actually not recovering. You would recall that small businesses, medium-sized business, big businesses are really a critical anchor into holding the economy together. In fact, it's one of the variables or yardsticks we use to measure if the economy is actually recovering, but also whether it's able to attract jobs. So that's the first thing. The second concern is the sector. Of course, these businesses, most of them sit in various sectors, but also one of the sectors is manufacturing sectors. And manufacturing sector is the engine or is the nerve center of any economy, because amongst the key things it does value addition from a primary production perspective. So in essence, that it's a lot more creator of jobs than any other sector, right? But also the other combination is that it also attracts both blue-collar workers, it attracts semi-skilled citizens, it also demands highly technical skills and even sometimes financial skills. So it's probably one sector that actually absorbs as many workers as possible. But also this liquidation happens on the back of several things. Firstly, is that our economy is growing at less than 0%. The Minister of Finance projects 1.6% of the growth of the economy. And we know that what has really been driving our economy since COVID has actually been the finance sector. And the finance sector is really not a manufacturing sector. Finance sector is just an indication of the type of transactions that are being undertaken in the economy. But in fact, it absorbs a very small number of workers, and it's just a platform that gets used for transaction. So in essence, that's something that we should really be concerned. In fact, I mean, if this data is actually, the timing is actually quite perfect because the budget in Parliament has really not been really approved. What that means is that there's an opportunity for members of Parliament right now to really start saying to the Minister of Finance, what is your target for job creation? But also the last point, by the way, is that interest rates have a massive impact on the businesses. And now, and I mean, in fact, I'm actually been tempted to even start looking at the voluntary liquidation versus mandatory liquidation.
Yeah,
because again, that is actually quite important to pay attention.
So let's go into that then. Voluntary is because you feel that business conditions have tightened, you're unable to continue as a going concern because, you know, it's really been difficult, the economy isn't doing too well. Mandatory, ultimately you've been told by the courts that you then ultimately need to close. Help us explain just a clear difference between the two, why those two happen necessarily, and how exactly then the economic circumstances and, as you said, interest rates play a role in that.
Yes. So the voluntary liquidations, right, we should be concerned about because it also means that businesses, amongst the key things is they don't want to go through all the legal issues related with liquidation. Because once you get liquidated, amongst the key things that really affects the status of the business, but also it could lead into loss of assets, but also at the same time, it just has a very negative connotation around liquidation itself. So what then business owners will then do, they'll make what we call market assessment. For example, they'll make what we call a demand assessment. They look at the pricing issues. They look at the operational costs. So there's a whole assessment that business owners go through before they even actually go into a voluntary liquidation. Obviously, the mandatory liquidation, it's also an indication that people who are likely to be owners of businesses really put up a little bit of a fight when they push through the business, and then they realize that, the courts have actually realized that your business cannot really continue because your liabilities are a lot more higher than your actual income. And so you're sitting with a lot of creditors in your book, and you're not able to actually honor the obligations that are associated with your debt, and therefore you then have to actually liquidate. So in essence, everything else then ties that into several things. So the first issue is you look at the GDP growth, which is a strong antennae, but also you look at business confidence, right? That in fact, if the business confidence actually decline, it's also an indication that there's a lot of pessimism that exists within the private sector, and therefore people feel that they actually don't really trust it. Now, just to tie this point, is that South Africa currently chairs the G20, and it needs to use this moment for both South Africa and Africa to make it sure that it attracts a lot more investment. It creates an enabling environment. And part of that enabling environment is what type of macroeconomic strategy, policy, or management approach that the South African government is actually undertaking. And I mean, similarly to the Africans, to the other African countries. So it means that there needs to be a package of proposals that are on the table for the private sector to really boost and drive trade and investment, so that you lessen the numbers of voluntary liquidation, but also you also lessen the numbers of mandatory liquidation.
Phelisa, please join us in studio. It's always awesome having you in studio, and we can have these conversations a little bit more in depth, and of course have a longer conversation as well. So please, let's see you again very soon, why don't we? Development economist and perfect.
You have my commitment.
Perfect. There we go. I love it. Have a happy Sunday. We'll chat to you very soon. Development economist and Oxfam board member Phelisa Nkomo joining us there as we unpack liquidations just a little bit more in the country. Indeed, a worrying number there. 140 added in the month of February alone. 246 so far for the year.